Hello, everyone. Welcome to this January's episode of the Think Tank on Resilience. I'm really excited to tackle this topic today because it turns out that employee burnout, which we're all worried about in the workplace, and mental health and retention is really highly tied to this term that you may or may not be familiar with, which is technostress. And this happens in retail workplaces. This happens in very corporate, in whether it's finance or construction or healthcare, this issue of internal technology changes. We're not today approaching the idea of you trying to sell a new technology to people outside your agency. We're talking about when you work inside an organization, for profit or nonprofit, and you say, hey, while you're doing your job, we're going to give you this thing to make your job easier or more efficient or better, or we're giving you this thing that you didn't used to have to do, but now because of compliance or reporting or streamlining or scalability, we now need you to do this while you do your job in a different way, or just tack something on. I think it's easy to see why this is something that is often stressful. Turns out that stress is not particular by generation. It's pretty easy to say, oh, sure, well, boomers and Gen X, and I'm fully Gen X, might struggle with that more than Gen Z who've lived their life on technology. It turns out in the workplace that doesn't make a big difference. Age doesn't make a big difference in this research. So let me introduce the two amazing guests who've agreed to be here with us today. And I want to start with Laurie Harding. Laurie's Healthcare Industry Affairs and Strategic Partnerships Senior Vice President at Inmar Intelligence, and she'll probably tell us a little bit about what they do, where she works to improve patient safety. They serve people who serve patients, access, and affordability. She's a patent-holding innovator, frequently published author, and a business leader. Larry served in a variety of leadership roles during her more than 30 years at Inmar, and I was lucky enough to meet her at the Inmar sales kickoff event last year when she invited me to give the keynote address. Laurie, hi, thank you for being here.
Happy to be here. It's good to see you.
In your experience, Laurie, how do employees feel about internal technology changes when they're first announced, and why?
I think, it's natural for people to be a little bit hesitant and apprehensive around change because they're going to have to do something different, learn something new. At least in the short term, it might slow them down. And, I think helping them with the replacement picture is always really important strategy because you want them to be more comfortable with the replacement picture than the current state, and that sort of helps ease those transitions.
Okay, I know that we're going to get to this idea of replacement picture. So everybody who's wondering what that is, hang on to that question for 1 second while I introduce Robin Alex. Robin is the co-founder of High Level, a technology platform transforming how agencies and small businesses grow and succeed, supporting nearly 90,000 customers worldwide. At the time of writing this bio, I bet it's higher now. It's important to know that High Level streamlines sales, marketing, operations. They use innovative tools and automation. And everybody who's worked professionally hears innovative tools and automation, and they hear, I'm going to have to learn to use something that I don't understand. That may not be true, but that's definitely how our brains interpret that. With a background in digital marketing and a passion for problem solving, Robin is committed to empowering businesses to unlock their full potential. He's based in Dallas, and Robin and I met at an event there just a couple of months ago. I was so impressed by his thought leadership and technology that I couldn't wait to invite him to join us today. Robin, thank you for being here. Hi.
Thank you for having me.
So let me ask you, Robin, since it is, I would imagine that you are often, I'm going to put this as clearly as I can, the cause of their problems. How do you find that employees feel, like their feelings about those internal tech changes that they're faced with?
Yeah, this is definitely a challenge that we deal with all the time. We develop our own software, and kind of the term is, we like to say we eat our own cake, not eat our own dog food, but we eat our own cake. But there are definitely challenges. We have two other partners, and we all three have a man with a hammer syndrome. So when we see a problem, we're just quickly, at the point of
I can
just
create something new to fix that. Yeah.
yeah, and but I think the biggest challenge internally is we're so excited about what we just developed or released that we want to get it out to the world. But unfortunately, our team internally mostly when they're new coming on, they have a set of expectations, we call it baggage of coming from other organizations where there's proper cycles, there's change management, there's process systems and things before we're able to release it. And for us, it's a lot of breaking a little bit of that culture. We kind of have that model of break things and then fix things just as fast. And you actually get to the solution faster. So it's a lot of coaching and education. And I think some of the things that Laurie just mentioned as well kind of play into that of you kind of frame what the future looks like, and that helps ease things over time. But you have to go through those cycles to getting there.
So let's dive into my meatiest question about all this. If I'm thinking about the people that work with me or myself, because I know that we're getting in my office a new electronic medical record or whatever it is, and I'm feeling that hesitation, I thought, Laurie, that was a really kind way to put what is often fear, freak out, avoidance, anger, irritability, resentment, right? It can come out in any of those ways. I think the question I really want us to answer today is, what skills do employees need to navigate the new tech? And how can we build those skills in our employees while they're doing their regular jobs? So, Robin, what have you seen the skills that you look for in the team that you bring in? Because you're saying you've experienced before that they come in with a different understanding than how you like to handle tech. What do you look for and what do you build on purpose?
Yeah, so there's two things that our team really looks at. One is we love hiring for the smile. Someone who has a good spirit and you talk about resilience, someone who takes things, on the positive lens. I think that helps quite a bit when things are difficult or there's a lot of change that's happening. The other side of it is really looking for someone who's inquisitive. Because when you do have change management, it's someone who's willing to, take it by the horns and really try to investigate not only what's being said or what's being, kind of the purpose of what's being put out there, but then how do they take it to the nth degree? And I think, what we've learned over time is if you can hire for those individuals, the hardest part is how do you build a culture that it's okay to continue being inquisitive and doing it in a good way? Because I think a lot of times it's, yes, you can have very inquisitive people, but they're used to kind of that mindset of I'm just here to do the job and I'm not allowed to ask questions or I'm not allowed to go beyond what's there. And so really trying to break that mindset has been really something that we've been more thoughtful of, yeah, as we start hiring more people.
What have you tried?
A lot of it is just conversation. You'd be surprised how many leaders forget to just talk to their team, and not just talking to the team on the tactics or you need to do this, but more in the sense of like, how are you actually doing? What can we actually do to help support you? And what are you seeing around the corner? And one of the questions that I always ask is, if there's one thing that you could change today, what would that be? And you'd be surprised. I mean, a lot of the best, team members that you have actually have the ideas that can really push the company forward.
Mhm.
Yeah, those are great suggestions. Laurie, what do you think?
Well, I'll jump in here with, we have a really strong culture of beliefs, standards, and values. And one of those is continuous improvement. And we talk about our values all the time in our culture because we want people to exhibit these behaviors all the time. And if you think about the underlying belief behind continuous improvement is there must be an even better way. Think about the history of the world. There must be an even better way, right? It's an easy thing to latch onto. And if you think about continuous improvement and everybody should be looking for the better way, just like what Robin said, we want all of our associates to come up with these ideas. And when they latch onto that and realize that change is really about our desire to just get 1% better every day and keep improving, and that it's a normal thing for us to be evolving and changing, they can get more comfortable with it.
When you then announce, I don't know what you've done recently, Larry, internally, but like a new payroll system or something like a new purchasing or a new CRM or something that's definitely people are going to be like, I like the old thing. I don't, I know how to use it. I know the workarounds. I know where my stuff is. At what points do you connect it to that continuous improvement value that you've named?
Yeah, so I think it's back to what I said at the very beginning about the replacement picture.
Great. So define that for me, would you?
Yeah, as a leader, you've got to be really good at communicating. We have a new payroll system. And the reason that we have a new payroll system is these are the things that are going to be better. This is the continuous improvement that we're, trying to accomplish. And in that vision of the replacement picture, you want to make sure that they understand that it's been vetted, and people like you were involved in making this decision, and, that you had a thoughtful process to getting there. And, that you want them to be a part of this journey of continuous improvement. It's almost like writing a press release. 6 months from now, you put a date on it and you say, this is what the world is going to look like because we have this new payroll system. You're going to be getting paid faster. You're going to have right on your mobile phone your pay stubs so that you can X, Y, and Z. The things that will make them get less comfortable with the current state and more comfortable with the future state.
Okay. I want to press back on that. I think that you're totally right, but I want to give a couple of real use cases to say, but what do you say in this case? So what I'm thinking of is a situation where the tech you're rolling out internally makes the company better, right? Better at earning money, or better at spending less, or better at keeping track of customers. But it will not actually ever make some of your employees' lives easier. It will always add a layer for them. So a couple of examples. I'm working with a company who they are a commercial construction company. They have, hundreds of projects at any given time. And so they want a new purchasing system so that they're wasting less as a company, keeping better track of what they're ordering, what they have, where it could go, what they need for certain projects. But it certainly for sure makes more work for every foreman, and it always will. So it is better for the company. The foreman is there. It would be a hard sell to be like, your life in 6 months will be X, Y, and Z easier. It'll be different. There may be some things you like about it that you don't have in the old way, but you will for sure have some things that you don't like about it, that there's nothing we can do. That's just how it has to be. Or in a nonprofit where they're going to have a CRM-like model for the first time to keep track of their members and the programs that they use, and how when they have kids in the younger kid programs, 2 years from now, this system is going to remind them to market their after-school programs to those same families. Better for the community, better for reaching their mission, better for the organization. Always going to be more work for the swim instructor who used to just have a printed list of who was coming and now has to put all these details in the system about every new kid every time. So how do you help people see the purpose and the advantage to continuous improvement for the organization when, it adds more struggle for you, and it will?
Yeah, I think that another important part of culture that you want to create in your company is around the growth mindset. And for people to be thinking about every organization, nonprofit, business, whoever it is, they have to grow. You either grow or you die. And you want people to be thinking about possibility thinking and growth. And you want to connect it back to them as individuals, because if your company is growing, guess what? That's more opportunities for your career, for you to grow, and for you to move up into the next level, and for you to continue to refine these new things to make them more efficient. Because if you in order to grow, right, you've got to becoming more efficient so that you can fuel that growth. And so I think that's another key component that people can latch onto.
I really appreciate that. What I don't hear you saying is, well, just, call on their altruistic nature, that they should want what's for the good of the company. That's also lovely. If you can get there, that's like a higher, I don't know, spiritual level. Fantastic. But just saying, hey, this isn't that we don't care about you. This is actually also good for you. But yes, it's also a pain. I get that. I don't need you to pretend it isn't annoying. When you're with me, I do when you're with the customer, but when you're with me, it's okay to say what you don't like about it, but it is also actually for your benefit. Robin, you serve so many different clients. can you tell me at the beginning of your business, or if you are aware of it now, what you've seen companies do well to help their employees utilize your technology and not be just freaked out and resentful about it?
Yeah, I mean, I see it day in and day out of the resentment. I mean, you mentioned like the nonprofit who implements the CRM. I mean, that's the business that I'm in. You know, we
Is it
create the
okay?
software to create that drama. But you know, one of the consistent things that I see where people really win it comes down to two things. One is you need to find the wins and then show the wins. And what I mean by that is if you have a culture of that, you know, what I mentioned earlier about being inquisitive and things like that, it's people who are trying to lean into whatever the problem is. And they're trying to tell everyone, like, hey guys, I kind of found this, like, we used to do it this way. Here's the new way to do it. Now, it may be different, it's going to be a little bit harder and all that, but I found the win. I found how to get to the finish line. And I think that's important from a culture of, you know, the contributors who are helping to lean into the new project. Now, as leaders, I think it's just as important on the other side to show and carry the wins, right? Like, hey, I just saw Laurie, you know, doing this. Let's all talk about that and let's really praise and really, you know, really exemplify the win that we just found here. And you're able to tie that back to the company win, right? Like, yes, it's a little bit tougher to do this new model in this software or whatever it might be, but it will help us in the bottom line, or it will help us make efficiencies maybe in the delivery of a product or something like that. So what we just did here, actually, maybe 3 months later, we'll actually see the win of it. And someone who's always kind of looking at it, you know, always at a high level, but you know, the analogy that I always put is you know, the claw machine. You know, very quickly you're in the toys, right? You got to figure out ways to pull it up to look at the macro picture. And it's someone who's always kind of at that level is usually the one that's championing the continual success of progressing into a new change.
Which brings up another strategy, which is finding champions.
I was just going to say the exact same thing. You know, I mean, the power of we and the diversity of thought from a group of people can be really important in making a change like this. And so if you've gotten representatives from the person who had to enter more in the CRM and from all of these other people in this project from the beginning, so that you have considered, you know, how people are going to feel, all of the people that are going to be impacted, and how are the ways that we can make sure that their perspective is considered on the front side of it. And then when you present the change to the organization, you bring in the power of we. We have incorporated diversity of thought here. We know how this is going to impact you. And here's how we've considered those things. It can be really, really powerful at, you know, getting more people behind it, championing it, and then you just get momentum.
Yeah, 100%. I think one of the areas that I've been, you know, been able to push things a lot further is collectively as humans, mostly within an organization, everyone wants the greater good. They're there for a mission and that they want it. So you're able to really build that energy and get everyone to drive forward. But really what I always look at is how quickly can I get to the, you know, when you talk about the 80/20, get to that 20% who are in some cases the detractors or, you know, kind of the cancerous individuals who are kind of going down a negative path. I typically like to separate them and kind of have more independent conversations with those individuals and win them over, because the faster that you can win them and then bring them back into the collective, your momentum, you know, that snowball effect will just start moving incredibly fast.
I want to actually interrupt myself to say, remember for everybody in the room, please put questions that you have in the chat because we're going to get to those before we're done. And I'd really like to include you. And what I wanted to ask is, you're both talking about the situation in which we're really intentional from the beginning of a change. And that's fantastic. I don't think it's the majority of the time, though, right? One of the things I've found is that sometimes an early on mistake that leaders make is they decide that something's going to be a small change and not a big deal. They just decide because for them it wouldn't be a big deal, or they don't see how it's going to impact. They don't ask their teams, hey, do you think this, you know, this change we're making from password and login and password to multi-factor authentication, we have to do it. I'm in medical, we had to do it, right? But they thought like, oh, it's just one extra step in the login. It was sold to them maybe by the tech company as like a nothing burger. And so they assume that it's not a big deal and they just launch it without a lot of intentionality, buy-in, any expectation setting or replacement picture, anything like that. So what skills are valuable, not strategy so much from leadership, but for people who may be here who are in not the actual decision maker, but they are tasked with carrying out these decisions? What are some skills we can build or that you've seen in employees where they can take something that turns out to be kind of frustrating or more of an obstacle than was prepared for, and they handle it? They're resilient about it. In addition to some of the traits or the mindset that you've both talked about, that curiosity, having the culture set up ahead of time, what can you do to rescue a situation of a tech rollout or new technology or a tech change, just an update that's not going well?
On my side, where I've seen it go horribly is when it's kind of you're just dropping a landmine of change and saying good luck, and then you spin your chair around and get back to normal cause of business, and you just let people kind of fester in their own problems. Where I've seen it work really successful though is really when leaders roll up their sleeves and they're in the trenches with them, and it's creating that constant feedback loop of there's change that's happening. You got to let me know what's working and what's not. And maybe it's not deliberate or direct, but at least the culture is in the sense of like, hey, I there's a problem. I'm raising my hand. Can we talk about this? When you foster that relationship, it does turn into end up with a successful outcome there. But I think just like what we've been talking about, a lot of it just comes down to the culture and dynamics of your team and making sure that you continue to strengthen that.
And I think, it's also, you want to let people, identify options, right? So, and think through it themselves. So there's the option of me, doing all of this new things, or there's the option of me not, or the company not, and thinking through the pros and cons on themselves. And sometimes it's just individuals have to go through that process to get where you need them to be. And as leaders, we just need to ask questions and let people go through that process.
So modeling that inquisitiveness and curiosity that Robin was talking about.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so Bruce actually just asked, he said, when you introduce the new, is it worthwhile to highlight the cost of the status quo? Just what you're talking about, Laurie, to say to them, hey, I'm telling you that if we continue as we are, here are the costs. Is that a strategy that you've seen help?
I think so. I think you want them to get more uncomfortable with the current picture so that the replacement picture looks like the better solution. And they not every associate might understand the process that you went through to make the decision on this change and why you're making this change. And sometimes that's really where you have to go in getting them uncomfortable with current state. I mean, who wants to be Change Healthcare or whoever it is that's had a big, going back to your dual authentication, have had a big security problem. A lot of companies have. It can turn the lights off in a company, so.
For sure. My health center had a data breach before we ended up doing all those things. So I've seen both sides of that. And listen, when I'm seeing a patient in the office and I want to get them to start taking a medicine daily when they never have, for a problem that will have long-term effects if they don't treat it, like high blood pressure is a great example. Somebody comes into me, I find that they have high blood pressure. They didn't know it, right? I say, hey, this is the thing. Why don't you go away, come back in 4 weeks? We'll see if it's still going on. Here's some things you could do in the meantime. They leave. They still feel fine. They felt fine before they saw me. They still feel fine. They used to call high blood pressure the silent killer because you really can't feel it. And these were like 1970s ticking time bomb commercial PSAs. They called it that. And they come back in, their blood pressure is still high. And I want to talk them into making a change that will lower their blood pressure, but lowering their blood pressure isn't a goal they ever had. I'm just asking them to eat differently or not smoke or exercise or take a medicine or something. And what I will often do is try to make them more uncomfortable with their current picture. I'll grab onto something, and this is the strategy I want to add on. I'll grab onto something that I know they want, right? Not, I know you want to have normal blood pressure, but I know you're so looking forward to dancing at your daughter's wedding next year because we've talked about that. So I also want that for you. Here's my concern. If we don't do anything about your blood pressure now, you could not reach that goal and have this host of other problems, right? Stroke, whatever. If you do make a change now, that is for sure. And I think, and this is something we haven't named, but I think empathy, like, yeah, this is a bummer. I'm sorry. It's not what you wanted. I hear that. Even if I think it's great, I can still say, I hear you saying this isn't what you wanted. Nobody likes to be told they have to do something they don't want to do. I get that. And here's the replacement picture. So I think people are kind of accustomed to this conversation when it comes to their health and the health of your job, the health of your company, the health of your relationship with the community, the health of your data, the safety of your data. I think that the model works. But Laura, you guys also try to get other companies to deal differently with technology, right? When
Absolutely, yes.
when you're doing that, are there, I want to get back to this idea of skills before we get to any more questions that come in. Are there skills that we can build in employees in addition to communication? I've heard that skill. Curiosity, I don't know if I think that there's a skill to curiosity, just the practice of asking questions and our practice of receiving questions without sounding betrayed or annoyed or things like that. Are there any other skills in addition to asking good questions and communicating how things are actually going that we could build in our teams so that when we have changes, intentional changes, changes we picked, people are better set up to handle?
I mean, I think, goal setting is a really important part of that because, too much change at one time can cause a lot of disruption, with people. And
Stress.
so and stress. And so you want to set goals and you want to say, in the first 30 days, this is where we want to go. This is our goal. This is the first part of the change. And in the second 30 days, we want to do these things. And you want to talk through those and like create kind of a joint plan for those goals. Because when people are involved
Okay.
in setting reasonable goals, then they can get more attached to that's reasonable. We can make that change. They're building their own skills to understanding what the future is going to be.
And that goes back to the power of we that you were talking about earlier. And I hear that, and because collaborating is a skill for sure. Robin, could you talk a little bit more? You mentioned briefly the skill of problem solving.
Mhm.
How
Yeah,
do you develop that in your own team, or how have you seen people develop that in employees when they weren't in at a crisis point?
yeah, my personal take on it is probably not the norm, but I do think that there's a little bit of salesmanship that goes into it in the effort of getting into problem solving because what you're really trying to do is one, you need to be able to read the room. And when I mentioned the 80/20, right? Like the 80% you can always really convince and negotiate and really pitch in the sense of value, right? Like what you mentioned, right? Like it's more about your health. I want you to make it to, your there for your kids, so that you can actually run with them and not, have heart issues and stuff like that. But the 20%, you kind of playing the other side where you're almost negotiating in fear, or, you're trying to convince them from a negative perspective of like, if you don't get this done, you're getting to the point of you're going to lose your job or your life is going to be a lot more difficult and it's going to be very difficult. And so when you talk about problem solving, I think it's someone who can kind of understand and read the room and then knowing how to have the deliberate conversation to really getting the person on the right side of the fence. And I think if you're able to really treat people or as leaders really understand how to treat people in that lens to really motivate them and putting them in the right direction, that actually translates into problem solving.
I like what you're saying. In medicine, we call that that fear-based, right? That like, hey, I'm trying to help you avoid the negative, as opposed to focusing with most people, as you've talked about, Larry, with getting to the positive. We call that informed consent, right? If a patient says to me, Doc, I'm not going to do anything about my blood pressure, I often will say that that's your decision, and I'm an expert in medicine, but you're an expert in you. I just need to know that I've clearly said to you, you're very likely to die younger if you don't treat your blood pressure than if you do. Is that clear to you? And if they say, yeah, it's clear, I'm not going to do it, then I feel fine about it, actually. In the same way that at work, if you're like, if you won't adopt this, within the next 3 months, you'll lose your job. And they're like, I get that. You're like, cool. Right. Like, it's not like someone in your family that you're stuck with them no matter how they feel about the things that are going on. And so I think that being able to be very clear about consequences, not in a punitive way, but in an honest way, that they deserve to know what will happen if they don't, then it's a good leadership skill, actually.
Yeah. And I think about, with our clients, sometimes you've got an economic buyer that made the decision that they were going to use our solution. And now we've got to work with all of the people who are
I've
using
never heard of it before.
our solution. And so I think helping them build connections. So, hey, would you like to join the users group and talk to other clients that we have about how they managed through some of these changes? Or here are some references that you can talk to so that they can, use those connections to help them navigate in their own way the change.
I really appreciate that, because that's one of the 8 resilience skills. So thank you for mentioning that one. And Lauren says that she thinks another skill that's really useful for this is critical thinking. And everybody in the room, if you want to add a skill that you see as being useful to develop to be able to handle these issues, I would be grateful. That's a fun thing for us to do and a good way to think about it. Developing critical thinking, I think you both said that part of that is having the culture to say, where people know it's actually okay to say, hey, I think there's a way to do this even better. Or, hey, I think I understand a way through this, or I hacked this, or, that finding the wins is an example of building that skill of critical thinking. Is there any other way that you can intentionally build critical thinking as a skill in your employees so that they have it when they need it?
One of the things that I like to see is when those opportunities come up where there is critical thinking that's actually being taken, it's, basically it's taking the pullback as a leader to,
Oh, that claw game you were talking about.
yeah, it's looking at it at the macro level. It's like, wow, that's actually great. We need to talk about this and how do we do this again? And it's, for me, I always kind of like, how do you get that next hit of we just did it in this really creative way, this crafty way, where we did use critical thinking, and you almost gamify it without gamifying it. I think, kind of putting it in that lens helps exemplify it a lot faster.
You're talking really about noticing when your people level up or level an idea up.
Yeah, yeah, basically, it's kind of continue to foster that concept of critical thinking, and so when you see it, it's not only acknowledging it, but then trying to create, like, how do we create this magic again? And when you're able to put that in the world that you're in, people are always just trying to strive for, "Ooh, I want to be the next one to come up with this cool way or this unique way in defining that solution."
Got it.
Yeah. And I think, that's the critical thinking is a part of, growth mindset is a part of our culture. And critical thinking is definitely a factor in that because, we believe in truth over harmony. We want to get it right, not prove we were right. And so, when people understand that that's what our mission is to get it right. And hey, there could be some gaps in the way we thought about making this change, and it's about getting it right, not proving we were right, and getting people on that growth mindset, critical thinking journey.
Carlota wrote, I think something that could also help during the transition is offering someone to support and teach them that new tech or have a guide. A lot of people feel stressed with that technology change because of their fear of the unknown. And I would add to that, Carlota, their fear that you're going to discover they're not the right person for their job, right? That when people are understanding that they're going to have to do their job and in a new way. They think it might expose some of their own fault lines and that they'll lose their job, right? Or not be seen as excellent as they were seen as before. So I think that's really true. And having not only, and forgive me, Robin, because you probably do this for your clients, but not only the vendor that sold you the new tech come in and do it, but somebody who speaks the language of your own company and understands that culture and understands that, oh, like, yeah, you're supposed to do that update on Thursdays at 3, but Thursdays at 3, we always have cookies in the lounge or whatever. That just someone who is really fluent and competent in your language and culture of your organization as the champion. One of the things I wanted to point out is that idea of finding champions, people who level up an idea or hack a new tech and find the win, or even give their opinion as you're deciding on the new technology. A few think tanks ago, and people are welcome to go back and look at it, we were talking about how do you stay resilient when you're trying to talk to people about ideas that they see completely differently than you do. And we were talking about convincing people who really only believed in fossil fuels to think about solar. And we were talking about talking to parents who were really fearful of immunizations about immunizations. We're talking about people who really had like entrenched beliefs. And one of the things that we came to in that conversation is that when you're trying to get somebody to change something that is really deep seated in their identity, oh, I do everything on paper. I'll tell you, I know doctors like that. I only write by hand in my charts. Well, cool, but you might as well draw me a picture that I don't understand because most people can't read your handwriting. You absolutely have to move to this electronic medical record. Yeah, I can't convince them. When somebody has an idea entrenched in their identity, what helps is to have someone they already identify strongly with who sees it a different way. And that champion is going to be really even more valuable when those detractors that you mentioned, Robin, say, but like we do the same job. We've been on the job as long as, for a long time, both of us, or we came up in this world together, or some way that they identify and say, well, you see it that way? Like the woman who runs PA Solar, who was one of our guests, she said, I never talked a farmer into PA Solar, but I found farmers to talk other farmers into using solar. And in that way, that we can level up our game at finding champions to make sure that there are people that are really identity aligned with those top detractors. So if it can't be you, like Robin, maybe you're great at it, but if you're talking to a company where you're not going to be the one to go in and help them, and they're like, I just got this one guy who thinks it's a terrible idea and he's poisoning the well for everyone, be like, okay, who does he align with? Not about this issue, but who does he identify with? And are any of them in the 80% that are open to it, warmer to it, a little bit more curious about it? I really appreciate the idea of a replacement picture. In science, we know, in behavioral science, we know that if you're trying to get somebody to stop doing something, and I mean like biting their fingernails, like anything, you're much more successful if you ask them to do something new than to just stop the old thing. Giving them a replacement behavior and then helping them see why and reinforcing it and rewarding it and all that stuff. Far more successful than just saying, hey, stop eating after 8 p.m. It's better for you. Stop eating after 8 p.m. When we say that, we're not so successful. If we say, starting at 8 p.m., close your kitchen and connect with this person in this way, get a massage, do something else, people are much more successful. And that's something I really heard, Laurie, in your replacement picture, is that we're going to both help people understand why the status quo isn't without risk and difficulty and pain and discomfort. And we're going to help you understand the replacement picture and what we get to do in the face of it. I really, Robin, want to take away the idea that finding the wins is not only about catching people doing well. Like, I so appreciate that Laurie really signed in using two-factor authentication this morning, even though it was hard, she did it. It does feel good, but it has a little bit of kindergarten teacher to it. So instead of only catching people doing what you wanted, saying, hey, Laurie mentioned to me this morning that when she first tried to get in with the multi-factor authentication, it was really frustrating because by the time she unlocked her phone, it timed out. So she put a Post-it on her laptop that said, unlock your phone. And then when she unlocked her phone and then she had to do it, it went really smoothly. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. That can be a really successful way, because I happen to know that Laurie sits next to me and she was just as annoyed by dual authentication as I was. So if she's less annoyed by it, she found a way to make it work, and she's looking at me across the way being like, yeah, it wasn't so bad, then I'm more likely to be open-minded to it. So there are things that we can do at the team level. There are things we can do at the leadership level. And we didn't talk too much about this, but for ourselves, when we have to navigate new technology, some of these strategies can really be helpful. Before we finish up, I wanted to start, and Robin, I'm going to start with you by asking you a more delightful question, which is, how do you add fun or joy to your work life when things are frustrating or stressful?
I've always had kind of the interesting personality of how do you, try to find, the lightheartedness of it. I think in business and in work, we sometimes get in each other's way of trying to find complexity or trying to make things harder than it really is. And so for me, it's always trying to break that thickness of when there's something hard, of like, how do we make this easier? Like, and sometimes it's just getting onto a completely different project that is unrelated to what I normally do in a day to day, along with the team that I'm working with. So it's trying to figure out ways to pull yourself out of the situation, even in that moment of, oh, this is really tough or this is really challenging. And, I find fun in that of trying to like, how do we separate ourselves from what's happening right now in the room?
So for you, you add fun because you try to remember in situations where it's hard to remember that if it's really hard, maybe it doesn't have to be this hard. Maybe I should step away from it and there'll be a way to find it to make it easier.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm that weird beast of that. That's actually fun for me.
No, that's pretty great. I mean, I think that a lot of visionary leaders, entrepreneurs, creatives are the kind of kids in school who really liked the fire drill or the assembly or the field trip or anything that took them out of their usual routine. And I'm guessing you were also one of those people who really liked
Yeah,
some people thrive in structure, but you were like, no, break it up, break it up. There's something fantastic. I don't care if it's a tornado drill. I'm excited because it changes the usual pattern. And changing a pattern is a great way actually to get some dopamine and improve the way you feel while you're stressed. Laurie, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I call it moments that matter. And I really
I like that you have a brand for your fun.
yeah, I really believe in that because it's almost like an equity bank that you can, pull from down the road. But, a lot of us are working in a hybrid environment. Sometimes we see others, sometimes we don't. And so I think it's important to create moments that matter where you bring people together, and it might be in person, it might be virtually, and you have some fun together, or you do something charitable together, or it's really just about building the bond between the teams so that they have these relationships that can help them navigate change and do other things that we need to do that are big things. And I think it's important for every leader to be purposefully thinking about, how am I going to create the moments that matter this year that are going to give my team that fuel that they need?
I really appreciate you saying that, as intentional as you are about getting people to do the things you need them to do,
Mhm.
you need to be that intentional about getting them to do things they need to be able to handle those times when it's hard.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, both of you, for your time, and everybody who joined us. It is, I think, going to be an evergreen issue that we are helping people navigate changes to the way they work while they're working. And I think these strategies really nailed a lot of the solutions. Have a really great day.